Hello. Okay, I'm loud and clear. Thank you for coming back. I'm Victoria from ISA. So please, if I have your attention, because I'm not sure if I can hear enough, and then since we have the recording, I must be very careful as well. So welcome back. So we have another session for today. Some few words, but also some more questions. That will be very interesting to combine what was said in the morning, what will be here today in this session, and also what will follow after, not only in the afternoon, but also in the next days. So how European interoperability, what is European interoperability, what is European interoperability framework, how all these things are combined, what are the latest, oops, I have to be careful of the mic, what are the latest developments, how different policies and different units or director generals are combined together the work and their effort to see one combined and result for all. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, which is Natalia Aristimuño, that you heard in the beginning, which is our head of unit for interoperability unit. That will describe briefly what is EIF and ISA² Programme, but also how this link with the other actions that are talked together. So I would like to welcome Natalia.
Okay, so now let's start with some more content. And, at least from our side, there will be no exam at the end, but could be an idea for next edition to know what is about. So what is interoperability? As I said, interoperability is not just a technical word that puts things together, but is about digital cooperation, is how we can reach mutual goals, because it's only by having the good interoperability that we can reach them. The sharing of information through business processes, how we exchange data, and very often they are supported by information systems. Well, I know you wanted to talk about new things, but interoperability or digitizing public administrations is not that new. Okay, it's not as old as K11, as we heard this morning, but we have, oops, it moves all over. We started with programs at European level in 1985, so there has been a lot of work done on how we can help public administrations to exchange information. And the last thing we did was the European Interoperability Framework, which was built after all these years of discussions and looking at the experiences between the different administrations. So you all have the details of the European Interoperability Framework, which is outside. We call it EIF, it's shortened. So what we aimed to do there was to have a model, which was a conceptual model with 4 layers that I will describe later, where we include the principles that need to be applied whenever we are developing public services. And by developing, I mean, and you will see why, not only the information systems, but it goes till the legal level of the public services. And in the last version, what we did was also to include recommendations, so real examples on how you can implement this principle for this layer so that you can really be hands-on immediately. I won't go in all the details of the interoperability framework, but what is important is, as I said, the layers that we have looked at. So technical interoperability, I think that's the easiest to understand, and there has been already a lot of work done on that. I'm not sure it's the easiest, but okay, it's one that is very well studied, everybody is aware, and normally when we start something, we know it has to be interoperable. Semantic interoperability. Well, now that data is everywhere, this has become also more obvious that we need to understand each other. When we name something, we have to understand the same thing, or at least know what the others are meaning with this word. So there has been a lot of work, and I will show some of the outputs that we have done on this semantic interoperability. we have seen also that we need organizational interoperability. And this is more on the sharing and exchanging information. In some cases in the public administration, and there was, for example, the public administration governance, you have different ministries or departments, and by the way they are set up, they cannot exchange information. They cannot share the information. So you create, through the governance, new barriers on how to exchange information. So we are looking also on how the governance or the organization has to be put in place so that interoperability is an enabler and is not creating new barriers for that. And the last one is the legal interoperability. And here is also very important, and there we are working very hard to promote this, because there are different levels on the legal interoperability. And one is normally lawyers or policymakers. They have sometimes also a lot of imagination. They want to, build a new policy, and they have great ideas. And then when we look at it from an interoperability perspective, we say, okay, but there you are inventing a new standard, and this will create new barriers, or you are putting here a phrase that will, in fact, forbidden to exchange information, and perhaps that's not what should be in this policy. So you see that even if you have solved the technical, semantic, and organizational interoperability, you may be confronted with legal barriers that you, and I have to say these ones are quite difficult sometimes to overcome. So that's why it is important, and since the drafting of the legislation, we look at this, and we don't create new barriers with the new legislation. Now I will, you have all the information is available also online on the framework, so now I will focus more on the ISA² program, which is one of the instruments to support and facilitate interoperability at a European level. As you see, so the program is for connecting public administrations, businesses, and citizens. This is not something which stands alone and works on its own silo, but is contributing to different other aspects, as I said, on the EIF. So it helps in supporting the implementation of the framework. It's also supporting the digital single market, because when you improve the interoperability, the digital single market is happening easier. For those who don't know, there was a ministerial eGov declaration in Tallinn in October 2017. This was a very interesting, there were like around 42 countries signing this declaration, where they committed to have to really have transformation on the digital administrations, to be citizen-oriented and including interoperability by default in all the public services. So if you don't know about it, I would say you can go and take a look to this declaration. And you can also call the countries to see how far they have implemented what they committed to. And there are other policy initiatives like Digital Single Gateway, where you will get more information in some minutes. And also we are complementing with other programs like research programs on Horizon Europe or Self Digital, where we can put together so that we increase the transformation of public services. So this was already mentioned by George this morning. The idea is to have an holistic approach to interoperability. As I said, we are looking cross-border, cross-sector, and I would say cross-border can also mean the different levels of administration, but because what we have seen also is that sometimes what is missing is the interactions between, for example, national, regional, and local administrations. And this is important also to keep in mind. So we are creating interoperability solutions, but also we are facilitating the reuse of those solutions. So you will see later that we promote a lot on open source and sharing and reusing of the solutions. Well, the benefits, I think that they are quite clear, because, well, first, when you have interoperability since the beginning, you reduce the cost of the development. they will be interoperable by default. Also by reducing the standards that are there, you don't need to reinvent them, so you can go faster. And this will give more efficient administrative procedures for which the businesses and the citizens will benefit, because it will be easier for them to interact with the public administration. As you see, the ISA² program is quite wide. We cover different aspects of interoperability at very different levels, supporting policies, having like more key or generic interoperability enablers, being it solutions or frameworks. All the information about the ISA² solutions are in the internet, so I won't go in all the details. I will focus on some of them. So, as I said, and this is part of the principles of the EIF, is on sharing and reuse. So there we have developed a framework which helps the public administrations to build information systems or public services, already having in mind the sharing and reuse. Because if you build something which is ready to be shared, it will be much easier to be reused afterwards than if you build something which is only focusing on one thing and then you have to almost develop everything to be reused. We also have an open source observatory where we look at how the open source communities are evolving and how they contribute. And we put highlights on how this is evolving. And in more concrete things, there is a European Union public license, and this is a license that allows you to publish information systems, open source, and you have the licensing on which these systems can be used by anybody. And we also have developed a methodology, project management methodology, which is open, and you can easily get to it. This can be applied for information systems, but indeed it can be applied for any project, being it IT or not. And in the Commission, we are using it very highly. All these open source have a place where you can find them. So JoinUp is a platform that has been done also open source. So you have the code of JoinUp also available. So you can also duplicate this platform wherever you want. But in any case, in JoinUp, you have the repository of all the outputs that are from the program, but not only that, because we have federation with other repositories. For example, the Spanish repository, we have federation. So, in fact, if you go to JoinUp, you can see the solutions that are available in Spain, and the other way around. If you go to Spain, you can access to JoinUp solutions. Yeah, there is a lot of information, and well, Victoria could talk about JoinUp for hours, but you can ask her questions during the coffee breaks afterwards. So these are some of examples, and as we said, we are also interacting with not only at European level, but if you see, for example, Uruguay, we have an agreement with Uruguay, and they have also put some of their information in JoinUp that is accessible there. Then, as I said, we had the framework on interoperability, and for that, we also built the European Interoperability Reference Architecture that helps when you have to implement the public services. And the benefits of the architecture is not only on the designing, because this will help you to design public services which are cross-border by default and interoperable by default, but it's also to assess what you already have. So because very often we don't start from zero, like not having anything, we have some legacy there. So it's very good to evaluate how interoperable is what you already have, which are the building blocks that you have, and how open they are. So it is very useful for assessing. Then it can also help on communicating and sharing, because once you have assessed what you have, you can easily interact and change and say, okay, I have this building block that can be part of another solution. And as I said, also for discovering and reusing. Another solution, so I won't go in all these solutions, but I wanted to mention the ones that could be highlights. So this is also how to measure the interoperability maturity of a public service. So this is, for example, for the single digital gateway, something that we are looking at, because there are a lot of public services that are available, digitalized today, but they were done for a given context, and in many cases, for example, they are not cross-border. But now, in the world we are living, and in Europe, borders are less and less fixed, and we have to be able to interact. So this is an easy way to analyze and see the maturity of the public services that are available and how they should evolve. As I said, semantic interoperability is very important. So there has been a lot of work on having core vocabularies and application profiles to define kind of data models with different technologies that anybody can use and don't need to reinvent, which makes two things much easier. Is reduce the cost, because you don't need to modelize that. It's already there, so you can include it and focus on the things that are specific for your public service, but it's also on the interaction or with other public services, because if you are using the same vocabularies, it will be much easier to exchange with other public services. Then there is also on how to describe these public services, because, well, we are in a digital world, digital government, which means that the public services have to be foundable in an easy way. And this will help also on how citizens access, but also how business can offer services on top of those services, for example. So this is a way that is helping in the presentation or the description of the public services. And I was told before that we have to work on the live events to make it even stronger. So this is just to say that it's not only theory and that we have done that work. It's already being used by different public services catalogs. And I would say also that all this work, the vocabularies and these specifications, they are always done together with all member states. So we work a lot with webinars, and so we do that together, so that it's not something that we impose being the European Commission, but that we work all together so that it serves the purpose of everybody. All this needs also some testing. So here you have a tool that we have developed to see the conformance with, for example, the specifications or the interoperability conformance of a tool that is developed. This is what is being covered by the tool, and there are two ways of using this tool. Either the service offer already in the cloud, so you can use and just test what is available there, or you can, as I said, for almost all what we do, you can download, install on your premises, and use it for your own purposes. Well, digital transformation and how we involve citizens. So this is a tool that you may know. It allows you to do any survey. So you can either use the tool, if you type EU survey, you will find. You can define a survey with different formats to get feedback. And this is, for example, used in some cities when they want to ask citizens, okay, do you want a park there, or what would you feel about having this new school up there? So this is one example, but there are many. The Commission is also using it to consult European citizens on big initiatives. And there is also a version that you can use, download and adapt for your own purposes. And when talking about citizens and the legal interoperability, this is also something that we have to look at how we can modernize the drafting of legislation. So this is really a new way of drafting legislation. It will be a tool that is based in a standard. And the idea is because very often when we have to, draft a new regulation or directive, at least at the European level, and we have to follow this format. And there was till now a lot of effort on the format, and sometimes the format was kind of blocking on the content. So we say, okay, let's focus on the content, let's use it, so it's policy making with information, and not just with format, paragraphs, alineas, and all what is behind a legislation. But it helps and it supports the policymakers much more. So the way this is done, it is, as I already said, it's an open source tool. This has been started developing for the European legislation, so the directives and regulations from the Commission, but Spain has already joined to use it for their own legislation. There are discussions also with Germany, and the idea is that this is an open source tool. It's available, the code is available in GitHub, and the description in JoinUp, and anybody can contribute, take it, or contribute to make it evolve. So there is a community around it to how to make it evolve, so that it will be improved much faster. And then, well, we have the Interoperability Academy that is like a newborn in the program. As we have already said, we had a lot of material that we thought it was good to be able to share, because it was too unstructured and dedicated for the different projects or actions, and we thought that it was a good idea to put them together. That's why we are working also in learning paths and user profiles. So, for example, first thing you would start learning about the EIF, and then you may go to the reference architecture, or you can, depending on your profile and your needs, you may have a different learning path, and that's what we are working on, so that you can find out. And this will also help to find gaps where we need more there. But I would say also that the thing is that this will be also open, and our idea is that we can make links to any other resources on e-learning or learning about public administrations anywhere. So, well, I am convinced, I hope you are a bit more convinced now, that interoperability is essential and is important in all policies. So it's not something which is sector for IT, for example, but it's really covering all the policies. It is already very well implemented in Europe and beyond. So we have reference we found, and this is like by chance, or in South Africa, they have done their own interoperability framework, which is based, and EIF is referenced there. And there are other examples around the world on that. So that's why, so this one was adopted, that version was adopted almost 2 years ago. The world is changing very fast. So that's why we have the opportunity this afternoon, and I'm really waiting for having your input on what should be the evolution of EIF. How would you see this can help in having changes applied to this framework? And then all the work that has been done under the ISA² program, which is finishing next year in 2020. Well, we will also discuss tomorrow on the Digital Europe program, which is the new program proposed by the Commission for the next multi-annual financial framework. And that's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for this introduction, which will lead us to the word that will follow after. Just a moment to put on the next presentation of the next speaker, but before announcing the next speaker. Oh, you want to have no? Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry, okay. This is the thing of change. So if we have like a few minutes for changes, so if someone wants to ask Natalia a few questions, please do so. Be brief, because we'll be here all day, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Hello, thanks for the presentation. It was really interesting. I'm interested on OPM. So my question is there something specifically for smart cities, like management of smart cities or something related?
So it is a very global thing, so there is nothing specific on smart cities. What I can say is for the interoperability framework, and we are now start to look at how we can help the cities, but nothing for the moment has been done specifically for cities, but it is so business agnostic, I would say, that it can be easily used.
Yes, thank you. My name is Huub Mulker. I'm from the Netherlands. A question on the status of both the IRA and the interoperability framework is when you introduce this, and at first you have to be a little bit delicate on how to push it towards potential users. But from the Netherlands, if we start a new project, we would have something like a project start architecture where you have some mandatory components. And I do realize that you cannot impose this on member states, regions, or whatever, but looking at the Commission itself, if there are many DGs, if one of the DGs starts a cross-border project, would your DG be part of that start architecture and say, okay, please use this? Because in real life I see initiatives without the foundation of the framework or the reference architecture.
Okay, yeah, that's a
so my real question is, in the future, would it be more mandatory?
Well, mandatory for member states, there is subsidiarity, so Commission does what can, and I think there is a lot of support. When the solutions are good enough, I think that you don't need to impose them because they get used. I can say in the Commission we are not perfect, and we have also some problems and a lot of legacy we have to manage, but we have a governance and some principles that for each project we look at, and they have to be complying with those, and we have some basic blocks that are always to be used. So not perfect, but we are going in that direction.
One question. Yeah, two questions at the back.
And then
we stop because it's very respectful of the time.
Good morning. Thank you for the interesting talk. I have a question concerning what else will be involved, because I'm Hanna de Bakker. I work for the Ministry of Interior for Belgium, and we're currently very much involved in integrating a couple of really big, large EU centralized databases in this area. So these systems are maintained by EU-LISA, which is based in Tallinn. I assume that has come up already, and we were very surprised that in a couple of different DGs from the Commission, there was also work being done around interoperability, and we were wondering whether the work we do will in the future also be more integrated with what you have been doing for the past 20 years. Thank you.
Well, I would say interoperability, as I said, is not dedicated to a sector. So for me, it is normal that everybody works on interoperability. Now, indeed, we have to make sure that there is alignment, and for the things that are common, we go in the same direction. So we are sharing. There is a lot of information shared also inside the Commission. and this is what we are also working more. And things like today or what we do within the Commission helps on raising awareness. And as previous question, we cannot impose some things, we can only raise awareness about them.
We have one more and the last one, please.
Hi, I'm Jerry from Ireland. I work at DANS, Data Archiving Network Services in the Netherlands. I was wondering how you're working with projects, for example, within the Horizon 2020, or also the plan for the upcoming Digital Europe projects as well, to make sure that the projects are implementing and making use of all of these tools.
So with H2020, we have not worked that much. I have to say we are a very small team also. I mean, you saw the pictures. In the world it seemed a lot, but that's all. So we cannot be everywhere. Now there have been some calls where we have introduced at least the notion of the framework, so that whenever, apply the applications for the grants in the Horizon Europe for that call, they were at least aware of the existence of the framework. In the Digital Europe program, this will be continued, so the ISA² program, some activity, the ones that make sense, will continue in the Digital Europe program, and there we are working because it's a wider program covering different aspects, and there is also on how we can promote the interoperability at all levels, and including also the private sector and SMEs. So we are now also starting to reach out to SMEs and startups, where interoperability can help them also a lot. Okay. Thank you, Natalia.
A big thanks for Natalia Aristimuño that also stayed, and also stayed also for questions, because I changed a bit the schedule for her. So I like to see that it's very interesting, the link between smart cities and also the other projects that are relevant. So we'll see how all these pictures get together and how this is collides after all. So I would like to welcome our next speaker, which is Marian Grubben. It's head of unit from DigiGrow, Digitalisation of Single Market.
Norbert first.
I don't mind.
Okay.
Okay, Marian, I think, yeah, thanks. So she will speak about the digital single market, and how this is connecting, and how to make this digital single market for citizens and businesses can help us all. So just a minute to open her slide, and welcome, Marian.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Marian Grubben, and unlike most of the previous speakers, I'm not working in the digital department of the Commission, but I work in the DG that is responsible for the single market. Okay, should I be closer to the mic? Maybe. Can you hear me now? So I was just explaining that I'm not part of the digital department, but I come from the department that deals with the single market. Now, I want to explain to you what the single digital gateway is, how it will be built, by whom and when. But just to take you one step back is about the why. Why did we in the Department for Single Market think that we needed a single digital gateway? As many of you will probably know, there is a sort of 5-year policy cycle in the Commission. Every 5 years we get a whole new fresh set of commissioners, and they all obviously want to have good new programs to implement. So 6 years ago, we were wondering what are currently the biggest obstacles for the single market. So what still prevents citizens, businesses, consumers from using their 4 freedoms, the freedom of movement for persons, free movement of goods, services, and capital. So we went to the organization called Eurochambre. They link up all the chambers of commerce in all the EU member states, and they brought us a whole list of the main obstacles mostly seen by SMEs in Europe. And to our surprise, they were not moaning so much about social security and posting of workers and taxation, but their single biggest obstacle was the lack of access to information about all the rules that apply in the different member states. Now, contrary to popular belief, Brussels has not regulated all the cucumbers out there. There's still a lot of national rules and obligations that apply to citizens and businesses who want to travel or do business across the single market. So the main problem, they said, we just can't find that information. If it's already available somewhere, then it's available in a language we don't understand. All these systems are different. It's just impossible for us to find out. And obviously, if you're a big multinational company, then you have a whole set of 10 lawyers who you can send out and find out about which rules apply. But if you're a citizen or an SME, then you don't have that luxury, and you need to have other means of access. So this is why we thought, okay, this is a big problem, and we need to be able to do something about this. That is how the plan for the single digital gateway was born. So back in 2015, we came up with a legal proposal, which we then negotiated together with the member states and the European Parliament, and it was adopted back in 2018. And this legal proposal, an EU regulation, establishes the single digital gateway and asks the Commission and the member states to set it up by December 2020. So we still have 1 year to go. Now, what is actually this single digital gateway? The single digital gateway is very much a cooperative project between the member states and the Commission. It is not a centralized but a federated approach. The idea is to put together all information that businesses and citizens need and to offer it fully online in easy to understand language, and also it should be easy to find. The second layer of the single digital gateway is about procedures. It's not enough for you to know what the rules are and what the procedures are, but then very often you also still need to interact with a local government in order to get things done. We've heard there are many international students here in this room today, so no doubt you had some interactions with the Leuven municipality. Maybe you had to get registered, and I hope for you that all this was really easy. But in reality, for many citizens and businesses, as soon as they cross a border in whatever way, then things become really, really complicated. So also the procedures need to be easy to find, fully online, easy to understand, and fully cross-border accessible. Finally, third layer of the gateway is assistance services. Because even in an ideal world, if all information is online and all your procedures are digital, you will still run into trouble. So you need help. And as part of the gateway, there is also easy access to any services that can help you. Now, what you need to understand is none of these three layers are new. What we're actually doing is pulling together things that already exist. Because at the EU level, we already have the Your Europe portal, which gives you information about EU rights and obligations. Many member states have done a great job in putting together national portals for citizens and businesses. And what the gateway will do is just pull it all together. We are creating right now a search facility that will search among all the notified portals, and that will make it easier to offer the information and the access to procedures to those who need it to do business. Another very important element of the single digital gateway is the role we have given to user feedback. Because of course, we in Brussels, we cannot start to police the quality and the availability of all the information that member states need to offer. And that is why we thought, well, why not ask the users? So on all the pages that will be part of the single digital gateway at EU level and at national level, there will be a user feedback mechanism. You know, the simple thing where you can say, did you find what you were looking for? Do you have any ideas on how to improve this information? All that will be collected across Europe, and we will put it in one single database that will be accessible for all those who manage the single digital gateway. And on that basis, we will police both the availability and the quality of all the services that will be part of the gateway. Now, just to take you one level deeper, what is this information that all member states will need to provide? We've come up with a whole list of headings that's largely built on what is usually called live events for citizens and for businesses, and this is the whole catalog of information that will need to be provided online in all member states. In the legislation that we adopted, the description is a bit more granular, so for each of these chapters we have refined exactly what needs to be part of it, because we want to avoid all these debates with member states. Well, is this in or is this not in? It should really be user-driven. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, the only thing that counts, that the information that users need should be there, and if it isn't there, then we need to do something about it. We've also, in the regulation, included very detailed quality criteria, because, of course, it doesn't make any sense if member states put online their legislation without explaining what this legislation means for citizens and businesses. The Single Digital Gateway is not for lawyers, or at least not only for lawyers. It's especially for people without a legal degree who still need to understand what the rules are. Then this is one of the very ambitious parts of the Single Digital Gateway. What we have done here is we looked at the procedures most frequently used by cross-border citizens and businesses. And both on the business side and on the citizen side, we've come up with a list of things that cross-border users very often need. And we've said to member states, all these procedures need to be offered fully online by the end of 2023. So as you can see, it's 21 procedures. There are also a couple of things which could be very interesting for you as students: enrolling in a university, applying for study financing, request recognition of academic diplomas. Many of these procedures are actually already online in some of the member states, but what we want to achieve here is that they will be made online in all of the EU member states. Then the assistance services that will be included in the gateway, this is a list of existing assistance services. Maybe you have heard of some. There's Solvit, your Europe Advice. For businesses, there are points of single contact, product contact points, etc. The problem here is that actually many users have never heard of any of these services. And we want to address that problem through the gateway. You don't need to know the name of a service. If you get stuck with any of your single market rights, then you can turn to a service and the gateway will help you to find the right one. So what are actually the main achievements of the Single Digital Gateway? In what way is it different from what we have done until now with all the things that we already built over the years? The first achievement, which I'm personally quite proud of, is the cross-silo coverage. Because you're working on public governance, no doubt, as part of your courses, you will learn that working across ministries, working across departments is extremely difficult in big organizations. And that is why big organizations have a tendency to come up with silo-based projects. They don't very often look at the overall picture. They just produce something, a new legal proposal within their policy area. Now, with the gateway, and it wasn't easy, I can assure you, we managed to cover the whole range of policy areas regardless of which DG within the Commission is dealing with them. And the same is obviously true for the member states, because they're only now waking up to the difficulties of working with all these silos within their national administrations. They're moaning a lot, but still it's a legal obligation now, so they have to do it. The second important thing is that we managed to convince all member states that this basic national information needs to be made available in English. For an average user of the World Wide Web, this sounds like obvious, but clearly for member states who are very proud of their national languages, and rightly so, adding English was a big step. So in order to achieve that, we had to pay them, we had to bribe them. So the Commission is going to pay for the translations of the basic information into English. But as a result, all these businesses that were complaining, well, if we can find information, we can still not read it, hopefully that problem will be solved. Then I already talked to you about the quality monitoring via web statistics and feedback. We're going to actually gather all this information together, and that will not only help us to monitor the quality, but it will also give us a huge database in which we can see, well, which of these services are most frequently used, and where are the big migration streams happening within the member states. So this is also a very interesting novelty of the Single Digital Gateway. Another thing that's part of the gateway is we will also develop a tool that will allow users, citizens, businesses, consumers to report problems that they encounter when they go about their business in the single market. We want to have a statistically relevant overview of what are the hot areas within the single market where things are really, really not working at all. And on that basis, it will then be easier for us to decide policy priorities, to decide where we need to start infringements against member states. There are all sorts of interesting things that you can do once you have this statistically representative view of where the bottlenecks are. Then, by far, the most ambitious part of the whole gateway is actually we will set up a once-only system for cross-border exchange of data and documents. This is also an area where we're working very closely together with our colleagues in the digital department in DG Connect. The plan here is that for a whole range of procedures, it should be possible for users to simply ask the authority who manages the procedure to go and search the evidence, like a diploma or a proof of good repute or all these things that you normally need to submit as part of procedures, to go and check it automatically in the database of the authority back in their home country who holds that information. So the users will no longer have to be, if you like, the messenger, first going to pick it up in paper format in the worst case, and then submitting it again to the authority who needs it. We want to shortcut this procedure by setting up a once-only system. And then finally, the 21 key procedures that you just saw, getting them all online and making sure that they're fully cross-border accessible is it's a big thing, and it will be very important to get that done. Now, what is the timetable? The regulation on Single Digital Gateway is already applicable since December 2018. In the meantime, we have started a search engine pilot because this is our main tool to make sure that people can find what they need across all these federated web portals. We've set up a coordination group of member states' national coordinators. They all have a task to manage the whole implementation process for their own country. We're meeting 6-7 times per year on all the different topics. It's very intense and it's really an ambitious work. We've adopted a first annual work program where we try to coordinate a bit, make sure that everybody will be ready by the several deadlines. And we're developing a whole range of common IT tools. So not only the search engine, but also a common dashboard where we will collect all the data. We will do common user feedback tools. These are the things that need to be ready by end of next year. So the launch of the gateway is foreseen in almost exactly a year from now. By that time, we will need to have translated all the basic information in English. We will have the quality checks of information and assistance service. They all need to be done. And then it's time for a small party. But not for long, because this is only the first deadline. The second deadline is in December 2023. So that is the time we will then still have to get the 21 procedures online, which involves not only ministries, but also authorities down to the level of municipalities. So this is only for that reason already a big challenge. All online procedures need to be fully cross-border accessible, so you no longer need to have situations where you open a form, you try to fill in your data, and then it says error because you haven't got a phone number that corresponds to the country where you're in. Things like that will need to all have been solved. And then finally, also by December 2023, we need to have this once-only system that will do all the exchange of evidence in the background. So that is the very short summary of what the gateway is about. For those of you who are interested to find out more details, we have the making of the Single Digital Gateway video online. You can find it on YouTube, and it gives you the full detail of all the elements I just mentioned. So that's the project. We really hope that in a year from now we can launch it, also with the help of all the great colleagues and many others. Any questions?
There must be a few.
I hope so.
Already. So please, go ahead. We have still plenty of time, I think. The first one at the back. So the first lady. Okay, well, we have more now. Okay, just keep it slowly. First the lady. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
My name is Sarah Verhoeven. I work for municipalities in the area of Flemish Brabant. It's here. Leuven is one of them. You said there will be money, or you will pay for translations for the information, but I think the most expensive part is the digitization of the procedures. Is there any type of finance for that?
Well, not for the digitalization of the procedures. There's no funding foreseen in the gateway regulation, but of course there are a lot of initiatives already being deployed. Natalia explained about the ISA² Programme, the whole interoperability thing. Many of the building blocks that the member states will need to put these procedures together are available at EU level as open source. And also, if you think about the once-only system, we're working together to make sure that the basic building blocks will be provided at EU level. And then it's up to member states to still build the bridges between the common nodes that we will develop and the base registries that need to be interconnected. But if you put together all the existing projects that are running and the possibilities of using open source elements, then I think all member states will come a long way in implementing this on the basis of existing software. Of course, before we launched this proposal for a regulation, we also did, as we have to, an impact assessment, and we looked at the level of digitalization in all the member states to see how much would the financial effort be. And there we saw that actually in half of the member states, digitalization is already so far advanced that what we're asking here is just a final last step. But for some others, the situation is more problematic, thinking of countries like Romania and Bulgaria, where not a lot of digitalization has happened, and they can use the regional funds to do part of this digitalization effort. So that's also a conversation we have with the national coordinators. If they have any specific problems, then come and see us, and we will see what is available in terms of funding from the different projects and programs in other areas.
Okay, thank you.
There are a couple of questions over there, I think.
Hello, I'm Georgia. I'm a Pioneer student. I wanted to ask whether it's a requirement to have a universal design in governmental websites, because like in my country, that's not something that exists. So I find it really difficult to like go on to different websites of ministries and see that they're different, and I can't actually use them in the same way. So yeah, that was my question.
That's a very good question, and actually again, as part of the impact assessment, we looked at the option to impose a sort of common design for all the web portals across Europe. But we very soon had to conclude that that was not a feasible solution, because many member states have already developed very good, very user-friendly portals. So to just tell them, well, you can just abandon that now, and now we will impose a sort of common look and feel, we felt that that was not the right approach. But of course, through the work that we're doing with the national coordinators, we're pushing very much to make sure that whatever your approach is, it should be user-centric, it should be user-friendly, and you should not have a situation where you send people through all the different portals in order to arrive at their destination. The approach we've chosen is one with a search facility in the middle, and that search facility should actually be as good as Google, which is pretty good, I can say from my experience. So it means that if you type in driving license Italy, then you don't first have to go to the central portal in Italy, but what you will get is, first of all, your basic EU level rights, so that you know what sort of rights you can claim, and then immediately the information about driving license in Italy. So if you like, that just makes a bridge between the confusion that you still have, because there are many different websites and many different portals. We'll see whether that works. If we need to do more, if we need to, for instance, ask member states to add new metadata so that the search will be better capable of finding the relevant information, then we can do that as a next step. But first we want to see in December 2020, once we launch it with just a search, does it work? If it works, so much the better. If it doesn't, then we need to do more.
Okay, we accept just one more, just to be, yes please, and then yes please.
Are these search and feedback interfaces going to be also open source and going to be available to be used beyond Europe? I ask this because I just came from Colombia yesterday, and we were having a lecture about that all Latin American countries are connected by treaties to EU. So it will be interesting to have like this same digital gateway, but with within Latin American and connected also towards Europe. Thanks.
I would really like that all the IT tools that we're using for the gateway are open source, and I'm trying to convince my colleagues that that's the way to go. For the user feedback mechanism, I think this is perfectly feasible, because there are open source user feedback tools out there, which we just need to adapt a bit. For the search, it's more complicated, because of course we cannot offer in the gateway a search that would be significantly worse than Google. I mean, then there wouldn't even be a point of offering a search, because you might as well just find the information to Google, which may very well be the long-term solution. So, as you know, Google is not open source, unfortunately. Maybe that's a new plan for the next commission. But right now, we want to make sure that people can find information. So for the search engine, we're doing a test with 3 different search engines as a basis, and we'll go for the best one. And I can already guarantee you it's not going to be open source. But all the rest, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Marian, for a very little presentation. I hope this time I will not confuse the speakers. We have only one. So, yeah, left. It's very interesting to see how we can break the silos, and also the interesting case. And speaking about breaking the silos, we need first of all to enhance trust between us and our member states and of course the citizens. And speaking about trust, before just closing some presentations here, I would like to, welcome Mr. Norbert Sagstetter, if I correct it. So he's ahead of unit for DigiConnect for the eGovernment and Trust unit. And speaking about trust, that is what saying about breaking the silos. So I think your work is really important. So please, Norbert, welcome, and I will try to open the presentation if I can. I hope. Yeah. So I think. Okay, I think I manage it. So, welcome.
Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you in this academic setting. I haven't done this for quite a while, I must admit. I will try to close the circle a bit. You've heard a lot about projects at the beginning. You've heard about regulation, how the Commission enforces regulation, implements regulation in this area. Now, I will mostly speak about policies. I will give you, I mean, you're a social scientist to a large majority, so maybe I can permit myself in taking you a bit up and taking you a bit in a level up to talk about some things that are more general. And I'd like to start to say, and I think this is something that we all know, I think, that we're living great times, and in particular at the Commission, we have a new Commission since very shortly. The Commission has high ambitions in the digital era. You know that the Commission has not put digital less than number 2 of its priorities. First priority is the Green Deal. Second priority is to make Europe fit for the digital age, and that is something I think which is in the institution extremely empowering. I can say this as I come from the digital department of the Commission, but I think it is something certainly which should be all for all of us to work on for the coming years. Digitalization, and you know all this, is changing our economy, our society, our administration. It's doing it for quite a while already, and it makes things possible. You know, it is an opener, it is an enabler, and the Commission wants to make digitalization a real enabler, wants to make Europe fit for the digital age. I will start to give you a couple of ideas. What is the scope of digital government policy at EU level? And what you see in here, I've highlighted some of these elements. They relate to efficiencies, so there is an element to reduce administrative burden. There's an element of competitiveness to make the EU more attractive to live in, to invest in for companies. But there's also an element of user-friendliness, of citizen centricity in digital government policy. And we've done, in fact, a study together with universities recently. I don't know if Leuven was part of it, to scope the e-government policies in the future 10, 15 years. And what came out of this, that this is actually, it is all a lot also about participation, about the way that we all enact with the public sphere. So there is there are elements of participatory culture. There is a strong element of trust, and what our engagement with those stakeholders show that trust is something that citizens find more and more important. I will share this to you in a second. There is an issue about public-private relationships, new ways of working in the public sector, other issues in here, a discussion on values, which in particular is important when we talk about data and artificial intelligence, ethical use of technology, educational elements. All these are elements that are important for digital government policy, e-government policy. But, I mean, at the same time, let's take a step back. I think we've got all our experiences from where we come from. Do we feel that the public sector is actually ready for this? Is the public sector today digital as we would like it to be? Now, the Commission has, in fact, the Union has 2 policy frameworks for this. One is the e-government action plan, and the overall objective is here. It's an action plan that's been introduced in 2016 and will run until 2020. We've set a goal here in 2016 that by 2020, public administration and public institutions in the EU should be open, efficient, inclusive, providing a borderless, personalized, user-friendly, end-to-end services. So this sounds great. This is really brilliant. Now, I think what we all know, and maybe what we should recall, is Europe is a multidimensional system. There is the European level where we work in, but there is certainly the national level. At the national level, in digital government and e-government takes the bulk of the work. It implements these policies in a very different way from member state to member state, according to their national policy priorities at local and regional level. And the role of the European Union certainly is to facilitate and to propose targets and I will come to some of the regulatory elements in a moment. So we're there to facilitate proposed targets, benchmarks. We're there to engage in a dialogue, to exchange best practice, but also in particular enable cross-border exchange through interoperability and through regulatory elements like we've just heard from Marian. And I will give you two practical examples in a moment. Some elements that the eGovernment Action Plan promotes. You will find a lot of national policy in here. You find the once-only principle. You find a principle that we also promote within the Commission, digital by default. Our objective is to make, in all the regulatory activity of the Commission, to put digital first, so to make all the regulatory part of the Commission's work digital ready. You find other elements in here: interoperability, trustworthiness, openness. The second main policy framework, which binds more the member states, and there you see the multidimensional part of our policy framework, is the Tallinn Declaration. I think, Natalia, you've referred to it. The Tallinn Declaration addresses similar areas, but it covers in particular member states, and it goes much beyond. The EU, 41 countries have signed up to the Tallinn Declaration. So how far have we got? Just to give you a little glimpse on our assessment in the implementation of e-government policies today, which is the e-government benchmark report the Commission issues every year in October. And now I leave these slides for you because I don't think you can, because I don't think you can read all of this now. But there are some messages which I'd like to highlight to you. So what you can see, and that's the positive message, is that since 2016, so in these three years, the gap between member states has been reduced considerably and consistently. At the same time, what we can also see is that trust in government is an increasingly important issue for people. Another element that I think which we would like to highlight is cross-border mobility. You know, a lot of what we do in here is focused on cross-border mobility, and this is, in many member states and across the board, the lowest scoring indicator in this research project. Again, and to complete the picture, the outcome also is that a stronger focus on security is needed when we look at e-government policies. Apparently, few public websites have passed security tests when that was carried out in the beginning of this year. Now, I will now give you a practical example of the European level, a regulatory example where the European level has set standards and has put together the different policies existing at member states, and that's the EIDAS regulation. The EIDAS stands for Electronic Identification and Authentication Services. It's a regulation that has been adopted in 2014. The purpose of that regulation is to enable the cross-border use of electronic signatures, seals, timestamps, web authentication certificates, but in particular also electronic ID, electronic identification. Most of our member states have it, but it doesn't yet fully work cross-border. And obviously, effective and efficient electronic identification and operational system of electronic identification, authentication cross-border is a prerequisite. It's the condition for many other things, including, I think, the once-only principle that Marian has referred to just a moment ago. On electronic identification, what is the situation? Today, we can say that 6 countries have it operational and it can be used cross-border. A number of other countries are lined up for it. You can see the picture in here. Now, you have to know that, in fact, it's not a very straightforward slide, I'm afraid. You can use it, or you have to use it legally. You have to be able to use it, legally speaking, 1 year from the date of publication on. So the first one was Germany. So since September 2018, German citizens can use their electronic identification across Europe, and then you can go down in the list. One of the latest additions was, in fact, Belgium with It's Me, which is a mobile identification scheme, and which has just been accepted by other member states 2 months ago. Another example, Marian has referred to it, is the once-only principle. We see it as one of the central policies to drive the delivery of cross-border digital public services in the EU. I mean, we all know the once-only principle in a much different sense. I think if you access commercial websites, if you do operations on your mobile phone, if you purchase goods on the internet, a lot of what you see there and a lot of what commercial sites do is in fact the once-only principle, in the sense that a lot of the data that you'd like to introduce is already there, you know. And I mean, we could have a long discussion about the conditions for this and whether this is the way it should be and whether this should be exactly the way it is. But as a matter of fact, it offers us convenience, and this is something where the private sector still has to live up to. So convenience and a seamless user experience is, I think, the target that we should be working for also in the public sector. And there, you know, the first concrete and fundamental step is within the single digital gateway, the deadline of December 23, where member states should make 21 procedures available within the once-only principle. And you've heard the example. So if you, from the 1st of January 2024, and if you apply for a study grant, which, for example, requires that you hand in your birth certificate as a matter of proof, and you've given this already to your home administration, it's available in digital format, this should not have to be provided anymore. So you don't need to provide this anymore. It will be handed between administrations. It's there already, it's there in the digital sphere, and it helps you in your procedure. I think I will stop here. There is a number of elements to operationalize the once-only principle at EU level, but I think this goes a bit too much into details. You can see that you know, when we want to do something like this, it is a joint exercise by different departments. It is an exercise which involves regulation. We see the EIDAS regulation as a major enabler, in particular through electronic identification. There are projects like Horizon, the CEF building blocks to enable this in future, the so-called Digital Europe program, which will be implemented under the next financial framework. And also there are implications for better regulation. So this is a number of the tools that we use to implement the once-only principle. So thank you very much.
Norbert, I don't know if we have time for a few questions. Yeah, we have one question over there, but maybe we'll need another mic because as long as I try to speak up, maybe it's not possible. So maybe we need a mic here. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers because this is very interesting. My name is Barbara. I work for the Environment Administration for the Brussels region. And so something that the last speaker raised a little bit is the object of my question. First of all, I'm very convinced that we need to develop a digital strategy because we can improve the services that we develop for our target groups, for the citizens and so on. But for instance, we are often challenged by questions on, first of all, social inclusion and how do you address people who are not digitalized, and that's the first part of my question. And the second one is we also need to, at least we have to consider also the impact on the environment, energy consumption of digitalization. And I was just wondering, because I need also arguments to develop the digitalization, do you have in the Commission also reflections, debates with your colleagues on this? And do you have arguments that I can also use on this more social or environmental debate? But I think it's important because if we want to develop a strategy, we also need to be able to respond to this kind of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not sure I can give you all of a response, but maybe some ideas on your On the impact of the environment, maybe first, I think this is a real issue, and if we look at big computing centers, we all know the ecological footprint is not very low. It's in fact very high. What I can say is that there are two priorities that this Commission will have, two horizontal priorities. The first one is the Green Deal, and I think maybe even today that there is a communication that will be published on that with that purpose. So I think, if you ask me, I think a digital transition and making digital fit for making Europe fit for the digital age cannot ignore the environmental element, the CO2 element. I mean, if we ignore that, we will not be successful and will not be able to explain that to citizens. So that has to be a core element of it. Now, I can't give you exactly the strategies or the elements how this could be ensured, but I know that this is very much on top of the considerations and on top of the discussions of every element of the digital strategy is the ecological footprint of it in the digital area. There is, I don't know if you remember that a number of years the Commission intended to actually standardize chargers. This is a bit the cucumber example. The chargers of mobile phones. Nobody wanted that, because that's much too aggressive and intransigence on people they want to be left alone. That's what we heard at the time, or the colleagues who did that heard that at the time. Although, in fact, if I remember correctly, the impact assessment had quite impressive figures in terms of savings for the environment for such an activity. So we have to always balance, I think, these different elements, but it's certainly an important part. On the social inclusion, I think it is something it is something that is considered. It passes through digital skills, reskilling, and there is a whole policy policy track that works on it. I don't know much about it. I'm afraid I cannot tell you much, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered. I mean, social inclusion, I suppose, passes also through different ways. I suppose if you live in the countryside, the digitization of your public administration can be quite a big step forward, because you don't have, it's not so easy to access some of the services. So it makes actually, it improves the accessibility of services quite a bit. I think there's also a generational issue. I mean, I have a daughter which is maybe in age close to some of you in here, and she lives on her mobile phone. So if government in, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years is not going to be on the mobile phone for most of its services, it will not be on the mind of the younger generation. And I think this is something we need to keep in mind a lot, because there it has huge implications for the way we conceive the public space, or even democracy. So there I firmly believe that inclusion passes also through digitization and through actually mobile government. I think mobile government is a very important target that we should look at.
Very, very interesting this one, since also one solely principles you said can help environment. If you think about it, you have to have less access. We have 2 more questions. Sorry, can you please also say your name before you have the question?
Yep. Hi, my name is Kenneth from Malaysia, part of the Pioneer program as well. I was just wondering, for the previous speaker and for the current speaker as well, at least in Malaysia, when we developed certain digital platforms, some of them turned into white elephants, one-stop portals, single sign-on services. They turn into white elephants where a lot of citizens don't actually use them and rely back on traditional methods. So does the European Commission actually track the usage of these platforms as key indicators as to the success of your implementation, and thereby implement interventions to increase the usage as part of your roadmaps? So that's my question.
Is there something from EID maybe?
No? Well, I have to just speak up then.
No, it's
Does it work?
Maybe we can use the mic. So, yeah.
I really like your question, because one of the things we came across when we did this impact assessment for this single digital gateway regulation is that there is a huge amount of duplication going on within the Commission, but also with the Member States. You're right, in many different parts of the administration, people create these single one-stop shops, but then, of course, once you have 10 single one-stop shops, it's no longer a one-stop shop. And then some of them, they're launched, but then, of course, launching something is always great fun, but then maintaining it is much more tedious. So if you then come back after a year, then it has become completely obsolete, it's out of date, information is not kept up to date. So as part of the principles for the Single Digital Gateway regulation, because we wanted to get this right, is the non-duplication principle. And we've told member states that for all these information areas they need to cover, they can only give us one link. So not 2 or 3, because 2 or 3 ministries are doing more or less the same thing, but just one. And there's also a provision in the Gateway regulation, and we'll start working on that after next year, to just get rid of all these white elephants, as you call them, things that have gone completely obsolete. We also encourage member states to keep the information up to date. We will have very specific rules for that. We also count on the user feedback to flag to us when things are completely out of date and no longer useful. So the idea is, in any case, to get this right and to make sure that when we talk about the Single Digital Gateway in 2 or 3 years' time, you will not be able to say, well, I looked at the gateway and it's a whole horde of white elephants. It should be a portal that is living, that is kept up to date, and that is also constantly adapted to the real user needs. So these are the principles, and we've also put in place some, what I think are pretty effective rules to make sure that it will really work like that.
Maybe I can add one element to this from like a digital ID perspective or EIDAS perspective. I mean, I think, usage usage is absolutely key. I mean, if you produce something that is not used, it loses absolutely its purpose. Now, in the world of EIDAS, e-signatures, EID, there are very different solutions, because the basic principle, and I don't think I mentioned that before, is technological neutrality in Europe. This is because member states implement e-government policies, electronic identification the way they would like to do that, according to certain standards, but it's very different from country to country, and the way this is conceived is different. So there are some solutions that have different uptake than others. And the triangle here, I think, is, as I would see it, it's convenience, it's security, and it's trust. If you don't trust the system, you will not buy into it. And I think this is trust is a very complex, is a very complex concept, and at least in my language, there is a saying, it's very quickly lost and very difficult to win back. So there is trust, security needs to be absolutely assured, and links to trust, and convenience is the key element, I think, for anybody of us. If you're not able to produce applications or facilitate applications that are convenient, then I think we will not be winning, not even the younger generation, but ourselves. So there is, you can today see the different applications of member states that favor either security or convenience, and that is something that we'd like to bring together. Another element, I think, in the public area is, I think the public sector needs to work much more with the private sector in this sense. There is a new, I don't know how to call this area, or a new sector, which is called GovTech. These are companies, sometimes or very often, these are smart, startup companies who work with the public sector and who offer very convenient and very swift solutions for the public sector. And the uptake is very different, It depends on the member state, it depends on the area. But there is a lot of very, very interesting solutions there, which are way beyond a lot of things that we see today. So it's a very dynamic area, but I think trust, security, convenience, and opening it to the private sector are some of the key elements if you want to move into that.
I have a follow-up question from Mr. Sagstetter. I hope you heard us giggle when you had up the slide about in 2020 all municipalities or all public administrations will be interoperable, user-centric, and so on. what is the leverage that the European Commission has, or those who are developing these ideas, in terms of actually focusing on accountability of the countries to deliver on those promises? We're all delivering a lot, lots of products, lots of open source, lots of research is developed, but then the ministries or the ministers told us all these things that they would accomplish until next year, but that's in like 2 weeks. So the reality seems to be far from the deliverables right now.
I mean, I think the Commission works in 3 ways. It has money to implement projects, it has possibility to pass regulation, and it can develop policies. And when it develops policies, it works a lot, you know, these are soft measures, so it works a lot through benchmark setting, target setting, dialoguing, you know. And sometimes, at least in my experience, now this is experience from a different area, I worked for quite a number of years in the rule of law area. And in this area, benchmark setting and naming and shaming works very well. If you tell a country, you know, your rule of law system is not exactly up to scratch, this can be very, very embarrassing. So, you know, soft tools can be, in fact, be very powerful if they are well used and well scoped and well combined with the right means, with financial means, and if there is, you know, a regulatory framework that supports it. Now, I think in our area, I think there is the single digital gateway, there is the once only principle, which is a very concrete element. You know, if member states by the 31st of December 2023 do not make these 21 procedures available digitally and as part of the once only principle, I could imagine that the Commission may want to consider whether an infringement case should be launched. At least this is a possibility. So there we have a very strong hand, and certainly, you know, it is something that is very it's a very complex exercise, but it is something where the Commission certainly can pin things down. Otherwise, I think e-government policy, digital government policy, and we are now at the time where this is being renewed. The strategy runs out in 2020, and for us, it's you know, it's an opportunity. We see it as an opportunity. We take stock. It's a year of taking, or it's a moment of taking stock on the EIDAS regulation. I didn't mention this. The EIDAS regulation will be reviewed in 2020. E-government policy will be reviewed in 2020. So a lot of the policy in this area will be reset in the coming 6 to 12 months. And I see this is a great opportunity for the whole of Europe to you know, to have a dialogue and to identify those targets, those areas where we want to actually excel, where we want to move ahead.
Thank you, Norbert. Thank you. Just before we finish, until I found my presentation to make the announcements, I would like to make the closure remarks by you. So, if I may, this was not scheduled. I would like Natalia to say a few words after all this wrap-up and see how many communalities we have. Because I see all these different things that you have, and it's, after all, breaking the silos and how it's important interoperability work together. So just, until I find the presentation, I would like to have like less than a minute word from Natalia, then Norbert, then Marian and George to wrap up with this very, very quickly. And because I have to make announcements for the last hour.
Okay. I will be very fast. The only thing I can say is that I think you all understood the importance of interoperability. I hope I raised enough awareness that is not only a technical aspect, and that indeed it covers all policies, and it can help in implementing them, or it can help in not implementing them, depending how it is done. And that's why also we need to work together. So it's not only on the technical part, and I think this your master that you are doing is what we are aiming also, and being today here is that digital and public services and even the private sector are more and more mixed up, and that's what we need, is to work together. So we need to raise awareness on the digital aspects to the policymakers and the other way around.
Thank you very much, Natalia. I think there is a mic over there. Yeah, thank you. Marian, it's yours.
Yeah, well, since you're giving me this opportunity, I would like to make a pitch for engaging you to help us to build this single digital gateway and also to make it a success, because I hope you've gathered from my presentation that what we have in mind is not a one-way street. It is not public administrations telling citizens and businesses what the rules are, but we really, really, really want to also get citizens and businesses and consumers to let us know how the single market really works. So with this tool that we're going to create, you know, the next time you're faced with a situation like, you know, you want to reserve a plane ticket, and you go to, let's say, the Lufthansa site, and then you find a really good price, and by the time you want to book it, you're reverted to the site in another country, where all of a sudden the price is much more expensive. So there is actually an EU rule that says that private enterprises cannot do this. Now, through the single digital gateway, we want to inform you that there is such a rule, that you have the right to complain, and we want to offer you the tool to complain. So, I mean, you won't get your money back, but please post us a message, give us a screenshot of this horrible situation, and once we have a significant volume of complaints in any particular area, you can count on it. We will start to act and make sure that this obstacle is being removed. So the single digital gateway is really about getting your help to make the single market work.
Thank you, Marian. I don't know, Norbert?
Okay. What should I say? I think digital and the environment are the two top themes in our societies. It's not only the Commission who thinks that these are the top themes. I think any government and across the societies, these are the two issues that we all feel will determine a lot of our future. It's very much thinking about digital and the public sector. I think it's something which can fundamentally change the way the public sector, you know, citizens hold the public sector accountable, how participation is organized, and it can change the way we see government and we see democracy even. It is very exciting. I don't know how far we will get. We will see. You know, I think it's a joint exercise. There are maybe some interactive elements or some elements that I can suggest to you. We do the IDIS review. The IDIS is the main regulatory framework for e-signature and electronic identification in Europe. It will be reviewed in the course of next year, and there will be a major public consultation in the first quarter of next year, and that is something, and I think it's an opportunity for all of you, if you're interested in this, to let us know how you feel digital identity should be carried into the future. We will not only look into the past, but we'll also look into the future. We will talk about convenience, we will talk about the link to the private sector, we will talk about the global reach of electronic identity. As it is conceived in Europe, it's conceived differently in Europe than in other parts of the world. Is that something you agree with and you would like to support? Is certainly something we would be interested in. So there's a very specific element I can indicate to you, and it will be published, I think, in the beginning of January.
Thank you, Norbert. George, I don't know if you want to say a few things.
I will say that, I mean, this is very inspiring, and I'm quite happy because I can guess that we will have very fruitful discussion during the workshops, because basically there will be a discussion tomorrow, a workshop on discussing how we bring policy to concrete action, so how we really link what we have, the principles we have in eGov and what we plan to do. So this is very encouraging. And another thing that I take is also to break the silos, and this is why I'm happy also with this crowd, is that multidisciplinarity is key as well. I mean, we cannot have now only IT people, only lawyers working apart, and after, I mean, trying to solve the problem. If you have them working together from the start, is how we could achieve success.
Thank you very much, George. I think we all came in the same concept that in order to work better, we need to work together, we need to join forces, and e-learning is a very important factor on this. And here, because of you and from you, we'll get better things and we all learn more about it. But I have to be fast because I forgot, and I have to. We have the lunch soon. So first of all, I would like to thank very much our speakers for this very nice. Thank you very much for all of these interesting speeches, and I will go directly to make the announcements for the rest of the day. First of all, we'll now have the lunch, so it will be served outside. Then we'll make a location switch for the workshops. And then, of course, will be the workshops. Just a note here, I hope I'm loud enough. I will be less than a minute, so please hang on. When you finish each session, so you can go, and we will meet tomorrow here. Yeah, I will. It's everything noted. When we leave, you can leave anytime you finish your session, but tomorrow you have to be here at 9:30 in this place as well. And I continue very, very fast. So this is the name of the slots and the sessions. But first of all, I want you to see this thing that Rory was mentioning to me, not to forget. So here you will see not only the Wi-Fi code, but also where you have to be after. So you will see the room, the session you have registered, and also your guide. So there are several people that are outside. After your lunch, we will be also get together in the main room, what was the cafe served. So each of them, there will be a name of the wall, of the person, and the room that he will guide you to the room. So you can go there with the moderation, the facilitators, and start the workshop. So I think I'm fast. I think I didn't forget anything. So meet at 1:30 in the entrance hall to start the workshop. This is the important fact. Thank you very much.